pick your ride.
From the West, where they were saying, it's a failed industry. Now living here in China, it's evident it's all part of our lives now.
Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Before we dive into my interview with Alex Reporterfy, probably the most knowledgeable Canadian YouTuber and journalist covering Chinese EVs. Here's why everyone is talking about Chinese EV boom right now. In 2025, Chinese EV makers didn't just build cars, they redefined global EV competition. Brands like BYD and Leapmotor posted dramatic growth, with some models nearly doubling sales year on year, and exports surging into Europe, Latin America, and beyond. Chinese EVs are rapidly gaining market share in places like Germany and the UK, even outpacing legacy giants like Tesla. But what's really grabbing headlines? Canada. Yes, Canada has agreed to allow tens of thousands of Chinese-made EVs into its market at a sharply reduced tariff, from a punitive 100% down to just about 6.1%, with a quota of up to roughly 49,000 vehicles per year. That is huge, a formal opening of a developed North American market to Chinese EVs after years of trade tensions. And get this, a majority of Canadians now support the move, with over 60% saying they want Chinese EVs available in their country. So if the story was simply about low prices, that's not the whole picture anymore. Let's get into the full interview with Alex, where we break down the real factors behind China's EV rise. So you've been covering Chinese EVs for a very long time, right? So what first drew your attention to the industry?
I think it's, the skepticism from the West, where they were saying, it's a failed industry. Now living here in China, it's evident it's all part of our lives now. It can't be actually avoided, whether it's in municipalities in Shenzhen that has one of the largest bus fleets that are, new energy vehicle, or we'll call it battery powered, to our everyday lives, where we're seeing almost 1 in 3 or 2 in 4 cars on the streets that are new energy vehicles, whether it's brands that establish names like BYD to NIO to Xiaopeng to many other brands. It's a market that continues to grow and continues to innovate. So it's part of everybody's life here in China.
And what do you think are the things that most outsiders don't understand about China's EV industry?
There is growing skepticism in the West on the reliability of these cars. Yes, there's going to be challenges with these vehicles, of course. With any new sector, there'll be new challenges. And, just like the automotive industry that we see in the United States that's been well established for 100 years, every time you try something new, there's going to be some issues, and there's going to have to be some redefining, whether it's in, aerodynamics to battery power. But with the new energy vehicles, there's quite a negative sentiment that was been put on them since day number one, saying, China is embarking on something that they don't have any skill with. But when we look at China's best countries that are working together in collaboration, like the Huawei's, like the CATLs, like the Chery industry that works to keep these vehicles within regulations, with the BYDs and so on and so forth. When you have collaborations that work together like China does, you can then start breaking, new barriers and new frontiers. And that's where we are right now. We are seeing so many things in technology, whether it's the battery technology or the software. It's the collaboration that China has and the support of the government that is helping moving this sector along.
There's still this belief, from many Westerners, that China is having this huge EU boom because of its massive state subsidies. And what's your take on that?
Well, I mean, if you watch any elections around the world in the Western Hemisphere, you will see how much importance is put in the automotive industry, even from, voting in the ballot box. Let's look at the last election in the United States, how key companies like Ford, General Motors, had the support of the current administration, and which, helped probably their campaign. It doesn't matter who we are, the automotive industry on what nation is always going to be a big industry, because that's how we get to work in the morning. That's how we move logistics around. That's how we get around in the world. Subsidy-wise, yes, of course, China is not trying to hide the fact. It's actually trying to embrace the fact that there's a government out there that is taking responsibility. And we have to understand, why is the government involved here? Well, it's very fair to say that they're looking at, ways forward. If you're going to bring in, a new energy vehicle into the market, you want uniformity that these cars will use maybe the same charger. Uh, don't go out and waste multi-billions of dollars when a company like CATL, a battery manufacturer, has pretty much solved all the problems for you. So it's the government trying to reduce risk, not just to the consumer, but also reduce risk to these new companies that are trying to bring great designs to the automotive industry, but also the full package. And when you have a collaboration with the companies, that makes things much, much easier and saves a lot of money and jobs.
And what differences do you see like between Chinese EV strategies and Western countries' EV strategies?
That's a good question. Just to add to my last comment is that there is a collaboration. CATL, for example, is one of the largest battery manufacturers here in China. It doesn't use this approach where it's going to align itself with the companies they want to. They say, we have a non-competitive edge. Yes, we want to do commerce. Yes, we want to do business, but we want to offer the same product to maybe 100, 200 companies out there that want to embark, whether it's a small size, mid size, or full size car, and as well as with software as well. Under the hood of some of these cars have a well-established, very well intellectual property giant, and of course a company that invests in IP, and that is Huawei. So it's China really protecting, the investment, because with every industry there's going to be casualties. So in this case, China's really trying to protect that. And as well as we bring a safety element to it as well, where a lot of these cars have gone through rigorous safety tests, and that can be shared. Where you got on the Western front, it's you against me and me against you, and it's the fight to the final battle. And if we don't make it, everybody crumbles, and there's real no, consolidation. The only car that we basically hear out of North America is a very unaffordable car by most people, by probably 99% of the people in North America. The only top 1% can really afford, and that's a Tesla. And as we know, Tesla also uses some of the Chinese products, just like the battery manufacturer CATL.
I want to mention something that I see in many European countries where they want to have this EV revolution, but what they like is the charging stations. They don't have a lot of charging stations like we have here in China.
Mm-hmm.
And that is kind of a barrier that is stopping them to develop the EV strategy. And what do you think are the reasons behind this difference?
Well, once again, here it's governments that don't understand the big picture here. If you're going to implement car companies, new energy vehicles, um, and enjoy the benefits from that, clean air, beautiful clean environment, savings to your citizens. Some people save 80 to 90% on their transportation costs a month by having that. But if you're going to implement new energy vehicles, well, you have to understand even the battery technology. There's companies like NEO that has a swappable battery that you don't have to sit and charge it for hours. You can actually drive it to a NEO swapping station and change the battery within 3 to 5 minutes. There are range extender batteries that are out there, depending on what the terrain is, what the climate is. So we can use any European Union country for an example and analyze them and say, okay, right, this country has very cold temperatures in the winter, very hot temperatures in the summer. This is the type of car, the type of battery. And from that point on, it's quite easy to map out, these type of charging stations. But then we have to understand that this is once again a competitive thing, that some of these car companies, they're not necessarily ready to, sorry, some of these car companies, they're not necessarily ready to do the massive investment. So they might just use a lower grade type of battery that is maybe universal, rather than a high-end battery that has maybe a range extension. So there's a lot of confusion there. There's a lot of things that need to be worked out. but one of them is the government definitely. Most government utilities in the European Union are owned by the government, whether it's electricity or gas or water filtration. These are government entities. For example, EDF is one of the largest electricity companies in France. Well, should we be surprised if EDF wants to get into the battery game and start supporting charging terminals for these cars? Well, we could easily say, well, hey, the government is subsidizing these vehicles, so it's a win-win if a country does decide to help its citizens out. But once again, it's that age-old problem here where it's profit over people's actually prosperity. And that's unfortunately where some of these countries only look for. They only look for profit, and they lack with this understanding that it can bring prosperity with investment.
Okay, and well, one final question from me is that what does the
Sure.
next phase of China's EV industry look like from your perspective?
That once again is a very good question because we're in uncharted territories right now, but we have to understand who are the buyers of these cars, right? Everybody always wants to go after the young upcoming trend in the market. And we look at this market and we understand that we have a whole new set of buyers out there that are buying these cars. This is the young generation. They have expectations now. They want more than a key and turning on a car and listening to a radio. They want zero gravity seats. They want onboard entertainment. They want LiDAR system. They want assisted parking. They want autonomous driving. They want autonomous parking. They want, so many different factors out of a car now that once you have a young individual in these new cars, or we'll call them smartphones on wheels, once they've established that, there's no going back. And that's where the automotive industry, a lot of these petrol cars, or we'll call them dumb cars, they cannot compete against this, especially for price, especially for distance and range, especially now for the quality of what you get dollar for dollar, and of course the new technology. It's a win-win on every aspect, and this is what the new market cannot compete with. So we will continue to see China to move forward in this sector, reaching out actually to North American manufacturers and willing to offer its technology, but unwillingly, a lot of these companies again have this closed mindset that it's us against them or it's us against the world. And as we see on every quarterly report coming out of Europe lately, it's layoffs, write-downs, and losses for some huge companies. You just have to look at Volkswagen, who's going through a very turbulent time in its long, legacy history. Unfortunately, we're seeing a lot of these latecomers, North American manufacturing, even the European manufacturing, not being able to keep up with the China rivals. And moving forward, we're going to continue to see, yes, some consolidation. There will be some casualties in this market, but the new energy vehicle market has a bright future, and we'll continue to see that for China.